Hello class. Today we have come up with a very important topic of American poets. Now when we talk about American poets, what comes first in our mind? Just think about it. American poets, yes, we have Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. They carry a special phase in the era of American poetry. They brought several changes in American poetry. So, we will talk about Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman in this PPT, right? And I promise you all that after going through this PPT, you will understand who Walt Whitman was and who was Emily Dickinson and their work. NET students, SET students, LT grade students, this is very important for you. So please pay special heed to it. Okay, so without wasting time, let's start. But before that, don't forget to subscribe my channel and please share it. So starting with the very first poet, that is Walt Whitman. When we talk about Walt Whitman, he was called the representative poet of America, and generally his works were in free verse. He was called the father of free verse. And actually when we talk about Walt Whitman, he aimed at literally revolutionary. He doesn't wanted to move in the same path as usually poets were moving, writing about religious works and all. He just wanted to, he has written songs based where there are crowded streets of men and women. So he wanted to bring a change in in poetry. So if we see that the works of Whitman, he incarnated the transition between naturalism and transcendentalism. Now, when we say, he incorporated both his views that there should be a naturalism and transcendentalism, right? When we talk about naturalism, it is always realism. So he wanted to experience reality of nature that is shown in his works. When we will discuss his work, you will get to know how he experienced and how his works are based on reality. And because of this, his one of the work was a controversial work. And there were some scenes where he was called a controversial poet for that particular poetry. What works we will discuss of Walt Whitman? That is Leaves of Grass and O Captain, My Captain. These two works are very important, and as we were telling you that a controversial work that he wrote was Leaves of Grass I was talking about. So we'll have a little of it, and then we'll discuss about O Captain, My Captain, which is very important, right? Now moving on with his work, please listen to this very carefully. They are really very important. So talking about Leaves of Grass, it was a collected poems were published in one volume called as Leaves of Grass. Poet as if he's sitting in a lawn, and over all the area there are scattered leaves. So was his poem. A collected poems. That means in that collection of poems there were many poems, and it was published in one volume and was titled as Leaves of Grass, right? And in this we will discuss only one poem that was the longest one, that was called as Song for Myself. Now, when we talk about Leaves of Grasses and the longest poem that we are going to discuss, Song for Myself, here poet takes a subject that is himself. He's talking about himself. He wants to celebrate. He's celebrating in himself. But here himself, he doesn't mean just his own self, but he wants other mankind, people and society praising the wonders of nature and their experience. According to his belief, there is a strong connection between poet and society, right? And here he expresses his love for world and nature. Here, in his poem, he represents I, which is represented as for the everything stuff, like what we are going to eat, where we are going to go. In that, I is represented in this poem. Me, myself, is represented as someone observing nature to what is happening. And when we talk about soul, it is the deepest essence. So please remember these three things: I, me, myself, and soul, right? When he writes poetry, Walt Whitman writes poetry, he doesn't see any boundary. He has broken all the boundaries of poetic forms because his poetry seems to be like a prose, right? And as I told you, that he was a free verse writer. Through his poetry, he uses unusual pictures, like images and symbols in his poetry. Right? Now the poet shows his deep thoughts and wants us to look at the word through his eyes. He wants us to look at the word he wants us to show. He has experienced different things and so he wanted to show it. Right? He also said that he is 37 years old and he's in perfect health. He has no issues with his health. And he wants to begin his journey with the hope that he will not cease till death. He presents different religions and foremost is the Christianity. He have in each and every line of the poem, he have some different idea altogether and he discusses those ideas, and he also tells that he wants to give his body back to nature, right? That nature gave, now he wants to give back his body. So these are the things that he represents through Leaves of Grasses. There were some other collection of poems which were not acceptable and they were rude. So was this work called as controversial. So please remember which was the longest poem in this collection. That was Song for Myself. And what Song for Myself represents here? It represents strong connection between poet and society, and he is praising the wonders of nature and their experience, right? And the last thing that he tells, that how I, me, myself and soul is represented at, right? So please remember all these things. Now moving on with his next poem, O Captain, My Captain. Now, O Captain, My Captain. It is an elegy where people are cheering on the successful return of the ship. Now you must be thinking it is an elegy which is written when somebody is dead, and here people are cheering on the successful return of the ship. Yes, because in the very first part of the poem, poet is trying to tell that people are shouting out of cheer as ship voyaged back to the land safely. On the other hand, he shows deep grief at the loss of their captain of the ship. They were all at deep grief and they seem to have they have had a bad nightmare that their captain is dead. But that was the reality, that their captain was lying dead on the deck. This elegy was written soon after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, President of America. We all know about the murder of Abraham Lincoln, and so this elegy was written soon after the assassination of the President of America, that is Abraham Lincoln. And here the ship represents the war-weathered nation following the Civil War. Please remember this, that here the ship represents the war-weathered nation following the Civil War. Right? This poetry, this elegy has a regular meter and a rhyme scheme. Now, we did two works of Walt Whitman, O Captain, My Captain, and Leaves of Grass. So, the other poets of the era were really influenced by his works, and one of the poet was Ezra Pound. She wrote a book entitled The Pact. Now this is important, please listen to this. Ezra Pound wrote a book, The Pact, and the subject of that book was Walt Whitman himself. Though Whitman must have died soon after Ezra Pound was born, but Ezra Pound was really influenced by his work, and she was reading his works since she started his career. Since she started her career, so she was really influenced, and so he wrote this book entitled The Pact for Walt Whitman. So please remember, O Captain, My Captain was an elegy which was written after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and what people are cheering for. And on the other hand, इस पोएम में दो expressions हैं, that is a cheering expression and a deep grief at a loss of someone very special whom people adored, and on the successful return of the ship where all other people were safe. Okay, so now moving on with the next poetess, we can say, that is Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson. She was born in Amherst, Massachusetts. Please remember to where she was born. Her works are notable for the use of irregular rhyming meter, as well as creative style of writing, and innovative use of metaphor is an inspirational one. Now, when we talk about Emily Dickinson, she was really admired by the poetries of Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, as well as John Keats. She was the most original American poets, Emily Dickinson, and her poetry was based on themes like death, life, immortality. Okay, and when you will see her poetry, when she takes a subject, death, it is exaggerated in each and every poetry in a different way. So we are going to discuss her work. As I told, that her works are notable for irregular rhyming meter, and she have her own creative style of writing, and she used different metaphors which are really inspirational to us. The very first volume of her work was published soon after her death in 1890, and she was a persistent figure in American culture. She lived a secluded life. That means she was not, that social, and she led a private life, but then also she had such great deep thoughts, and she discusses that well in her poetry. Dickinson's poetry is interesting as it carries an eagle-eye observer who sees the inevitable limitations of society and can imagine the way out of those limitations. That means she, in her poetry, the speaker was a sharp observer who observes every the all the limitations of the society, which are not at all escapable, but she also imagined the way out of those limitations. So Dickinson, she's remembered for her creative style of writing and the innovative use of metaphor and the different ideas that she represents through her poetry. She's remembered for that. Now, the very first poetry that we are going to talk about is Because I Could Not Stop for Death. But before we start, we should notice one thing, that her poetries did not have any title. She never gave any title to any of the poetry, but her title was itself the very first line of poetry. Please remember this. This is important. Because I could not stop for death. This poem is about the journey of death and a step to the eternal world. Here, Emily Dickinson, she embraced death beautifully, and as we all say, she describes her journey with death from life to afterlife, right? She says that death is not an end, but a step to eternity. And in this journey of life, she says that it has never ended and it is not going to end ever. Here she illustrates three things in her poem, that is life, death and immortality, where step by step she tells that how she is busy with her life, with her temporary life. She thinks that this life is temporary, which is obviously truth of life, you can say. And she says that now she's being tired and she's not willing to go on with this busy and meaningless humdrums of the life, right? And she thinks death as her fiance, and now she wants to move on, and she's waiting for the moment to when death will take her to the new spiritual world, to the world of eternity. She is not at all frightened of death, but she tries to tell that it is a step and it will lead a way to eternity. So she welcomes death, and so it has been expressed very beautifully. And as we say now, that with the open hands she welcomes death, and she waits for that movement. She's so curious to move on to the new word, and she says that that is the real word, and we are living a temporary life. In this poem there comes a scene, this is an emotional scene where children are playing, and here writer represent it as a difficulty of life, because she says that these all things are meaningless. The main thing, the life which will begin, with the new phase that will begin, that will be after death. So she desires to leave her physical life and she wants to begin the eternal spiritual life of the soul. She says that life carries different paths, like early childhood, then school, and then work. But now she's tired of all these things and she wants to move on, and she wants to unite with death. So she's waiting impatiently, and so that she can begin her journey of death, um, and an endless life. She realized that the life before marriage was temporary and real life will begin after death. The author does not consider death as a full stop in the sentence of the story of her life. Now I'm telling you in literature terms. We talk about commas, full stop, sentences. So here death is not a full stop in the sentence of the story of her life. Instead, she takes a comma and she starts a new phase of her life. Right? So this poem is expressed beautifully and is really very important. Where death is something which has been expressed so beautifully, and we should not be frightened of that. To where she tells death is a subject in this poem, and the main theme is immortality. She she has expressed death in different poems in a different way, but this is the most beautiful one. Now moving ahead with her next work, Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Now the feather of hope is present in every one of us, even in the darkest hour of our life. Here Emily Dickinson, she tries to tell that hope has feathers. Like there in our heart, every one of us have some other hope. When we don't have any strength and we are in most adverse condition, then also we have a light of hope somewhere in our heart. Here Dickinson compares a bird with hope. She says that like a bird, hope has feather which perch in the human soul. As we see that feathers are soft and gentle to touch, but when they take a flight, they are strong enough, right? So is our hope. Here she says that it is a pure feeling and a deep-seated emotion that can take flight at any time. She also says that in the height of storm, its voice can be heard. However, how busy we are, how bad condition we are in, we have some or the other hope. So we should not leave that hope. As we say, where there is hope, there is life. So we should not fall down because there is hope and there is life. Hope resides deep within in the journey between life and the final closure of eyes. That means when we start our life to the final end till we die, hope resides within us. So this was a very, motivational poem where it is full of hope, right? So moving on with the next poem, Success is Counted Sweetest. In this poem, author talks success and failure, and this is illustrated through different examples in the poem. Here the poem expresses that when we are in need of food, we keep starving, that we need food, but once we get it, we are like, okay, now is it okay? Like we take a bite, then again a bite, and as our stomach is full, we doesn't need that food. So is the success. The people who keep getting success, they doesn't know the taste of success. But people, those of us have experienced failure in life, when they get success, they know the taste of it, the difference they feel. the happiness that they feel within them is something different. It is said as failure is a key to success, but one needs motivation in order to achieve success. हम सबको motivation चाहिए होता है so that we can achieve success, right? And failure is a key to success. Why? जब हमें फेलियर मिलता है और उसके बाद सक्सेस मिलती है, so we understand things and then we move on with that motivation and we succeed in life. When we have a desire of something and we cannot retrieve it, the desire becomes strong and we move at the back of that desire and we achieve it. Failure is a motivation to succeed. We should not take failure as a downfall, but a motivation so that we can succeed. So I already told you this point, that the person who have once experienced failure in life knows the taste of success when achieved. Right? So this poetry is all about success, and when it is counted as sweetest when we face failure in life. Her poet Emily Dickinson, she compares the battlefield where there is a losing party and a winning party to how they feel, those who lose and to those who win. So she tries to tell that in order to understand a nectar, you have to be seriously in need of it. जब तक आपको किसी चीज की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत नहीं होती है, तब तक आप उसका यूज नहीं समझ सकते हैं. As NET students know how important this presentation is. This is a nectar for them. So they will understand the value of this presentation and the need of material and the need of these poets, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson. So with this, I would like to end my presentation. And when we talk of Emily Dickinson, she was also called Nun of Amarest. Please remember, this is important, and this was one of the NET questions too. Nun of Amarest, that is Emily Dickinson. These two poets, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson, they paved a new and refreshing era of poetry. They have had, their inner dynamic world that is shown in their poetry. So here we end with our presentation. Please read it and don't forget to subscribe my channel and share it. Thank you. I will meet you with more American poets. Till then, bye. Take care.